GW1516? Never heard of it. Oh, it's also called Endurable. Yeah, now that rings a bell. So welcome back to the channel. Just a quick plug. If you like what I'm doing and you're a fan of asking questions, then please don't leave without subscribing to the channel. It costs you nothing, but it helps me a great deal. So as hinted at during the recent press conference, video link here, we knew that some drug tests were going to come back with less than favourable results. Now, as of recording this, we know that 2 teams have been disqualified from competing at the CrossFit Games due to one of their team members testing positive for GW1516, which is also known as Endurable. Now, that's quite a well-known name within the CrossFit world because the most notorious case regarding PEDs would have been that of Ricky Garrard, and this is the very thing he was caught using. Now, if you want a quick case of deja vu, I would say go back and look at some of those early interviews of Ricky Garrard when he first got caught. Very similar to the kind of things we're hearing at the moment. Quite different from what we heard when Ricky was interviewed by Chase Ingram on the CrossFit Games podcast when coming back from that ban. Now, I know, for example, Hiller said he wouldn't make a video about a team popping for PEDs and claiming tainted supplements. It's almost a story as old as CrossFit, right? And yeah, I'm with him on that, and I wouldn't have made a video about that either. And in fact, this video isn't so much about that, but it's much more about the recent interview that Jaylond Franklin did with the Clydesdale Media rig report. Because I have questions, and one of the main questions I have is who advised him to do this? Because I've got even more questions for that person. Just for a quick bit of context on what's going on at the moment. So as of recording, I said we've got 2 teams. The one is CrossFit CLT. Now, they've put out an Instagram post explaining that one of their team members, Hunter, he popped for trace amounts. So no indication of how these trace amounts were. But they claim that it wouldn't have even helped him to perform in the semifinals. Well, maybe they were higher amounts during the 6 months of training leading up to the semifinals. I don't know. I mean, it's irrelevant at this point, isn't it? It's in your system. So they're also claiming tainted substance. They don't appear to be appealing. They've accepted that they're out for this season, and it's reforming the team with a different male as part of that pair for next season, and they seem to just be looking ahead. You can read the Instagram post. All the information is there. But the second team, Shoefly, now that's a bit more interesting to me because instead of a simple Instagram post, Jaylond appeared on the Clydesdale Fitness Media rig report to share his story. And I find this fascinating because as I was watching it, it actually raised more questions than it answered. Now, I'd just like to preface this that when Scott started the video, he did introduce it by saying that they were viewing this as news. They were just there to have Jaylond tell his story, and they were not going to kind of impart their personal opinions or biases on it in any way. And I really appreciate that. That's very much the purpose of this channel, is I just like facts. I don't want to, speculate too much. And I worry that this video may be seen as a little bit too much speculation, but I'm less speculating as just asking questions. But at this point, they're hypothetical questions because I wasn't there at the interview to ask these questions. And then maybe highlight the concern I have by these questions being raised probably by other people that are watching the video and what that might mean for athletes that find themselves in Jaylond's situation. Now, I too have no personal bias here. I don't know him at all. I'm not enraged or angry or feel that he's trying to cheat this sport that I hold so dear. I don't have any issue with CrossFit. I don't believe that they are protecting some athletes and then they use people like Jaylond as an example just to prove that they are testing so that they can kind of claim it's a clean sport and protect the athletes that they think are the money cows. I don't feel that way at all. This is just, I've watched this interview. I've got questions, and I'm going to share with you my questions and why I feel that they're not just, questions that I have, but questions that probably other people have, and maybe the danger of those questions just being left lingering there. So what I'd like to do now is just play a few clips that I've cut from that interview, and then just raise the question that I would have afterwards, or maybe reference back to something that was said a little bit earlier in the interview to show, maybe why a statement is a little bit contradictory and the problems that could cause. So let's start with the first little clip.
So I guess we could start from the beginning, from what I think. I think it was that popped me. Around March, I was training for the individual quarterfinals, and a buddy of mine went to SFAS, and if anybody knows what that is, it's Special Forces Assessment and Selection, and he introduced me to this supplement that he was taking. Said he had been taking it for about a month. It increased his endurance. He was able to go longer, harder, faster, and he knew what I did as far as CrossFit. He was like, "Man, I really think this will help you." And this was kind of my first year of taking competing like super seriously, and I was bouncing around between a bunch of different supplements. And I started taking the stuff that he was giving me, and didn't read into it, didn't do any research actually. And I know ignorance of the law does not excuse you from the law, but that's kind of what happened. Started taking that stuff, and around the end of March, I stopped taking it and never really thought about it again until it popped up Friday when I failed the drug test.
So I already have a couple of questions, and maybe one of the most important questions I think comes straight away from here. So first of all, you're saying this Special Forces buddy, he's been taking this supplement for 1 month. It's increasing endurance. He can go longer, harder, faster. And you're willing to just take that. I mean, these are quite substantial claims. Why did you not do any research? He says that he didn't really look into it at all. I mean, you would think you'd do some research, not necessarily, is this a banned substance, but even just to see whether or not these claims are true. Is this just anecdotal for one person? Are there other people that are taking this supplement and telling you that it's incredible? And also, come on, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So surely you would want to just double check that there's nothing here that could be a danger for you, especially if you're pursuing CrossFit at the highest level and you have ambitions, and clearly they were not, crazy ambitions because your team qualified, to go to the games. The second question I have that is the more damning question, I think, maybe the most in this whole interview, is why did you stop in March? He mentions that he stopped taking it in March, but nobody asks why. Why did you stop taking it? Was it not working? You didn't notice any difference, so you just stopped taking it? Were you worried that if you kept taking it, it could show up in a drugs test down the line? Were you advised to stop taking it? Like, the answer to this question is really important, and we will come back to it again. But let's take a look at another clip.
So what I was asking is, the person that you got the supplement from, is that someone that you would trust implicitly? And does he understand that you are a professional athlete?
It's someone I trust. I don't think it really went as deep as like, oh, Jaylond's a professional, maybe I should look into this stuff before I offer it to him. I think it was more so of him just like, because we train together all the time when I'm at the unit. So it was more so him just like being like, hey, I know what you're trying to do. I know your goals. This helped me reach my goal. Maybe it can help you reach your goal.
Was the supplement a powder or a pill or what?
It was a pill.
Okay.
It was a pill.
Mm-hmm. So not only did you not look into it, but it appears that your friend didn't look into it either. And it kind of feels like we're talking about a magic pill here. So we found out that it wasn't a powder, it was a pill. And you're told that, well, look, I had trouble reaching my goal. I took these pills and I got there, and I think it could do the same for you. And probably he didn't look into whether or not that would be okay for you to use as an athlete. You didn't look into whether or not that would be okay. So at this point, it's going to be hard for people to feel sympathetic towards you, to, it wasn't his fault. It was a tainted substance. But, you didn't look into it at all. And again, I'm going to come back later as to why these kind of statements are not helping the situation that you now find yourself in. And then once again, something else gets brought up.
So I do have one question. If you don't want to answer it, please, I trust you. Do they tell you like how much you test for, or is it just a positive yes or no? Or do they measure the amount that is in your system?
Initially, they tell you, like with the email, they tell you tested for this. If you want your results, you have to pay $200 to get the results of your test, which we are doing, and because we want those results, and we want to know like how much of it was in it. Because if I stopped taking the pills, in March, then it should have been very minimum to low doses in it. But if it's high, then it means it was something that I was continuously taking. So we want to know like where it was so we can kind of narrow like what it was that popped me.
So again, we're talking about the amounts being trace, because if he stopped taking the pills in March, it would only be trace amounts now. Why did he stop taking the pills in March? Like, this is the question I can't stop asking. If you had no doubts about what you were taking, if you really didn't need to research it, you didn't think about it, you trusted your friend, why did you stop taking it in March? It sounds suspicious. Now, maybe there's a really simple answer. I ran out. I couldn't find any more. Like, it could be anything. But with the lack of a clear answer, opens the doorway for speculation. And the biggest speculation is going to be, especially when you say, well, I know if I'd stopped taking them in March, there would have been tiny, tiny trace amounts, probably amounts that wouldn't have shown up in a drug test, I would have hoped, by the time of the semifinals. That sounds suspiciously like someone deliberately cycling off something. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that's what it can easily be interpreted as through the answers given so far during this interview. Next clip.
And is there anything you want to say to those teammates at this point, or have you already done that privately?
I don't think I've spoken to him privately yet, but I know the gym, Shoe Fly, the owner Street, Danielle, Jaylond, Nick. I'm sorry. Like I gotta do my due diligence as a person, as an athlete, as a professional athlete, to know what I'm putting in my body and what I'm taking. Like,
so here we start talking about due diligence. I mean, how can we talk about due diligence when we've already mentioned both Jaylond and his friend, neither of them did any research into this substance? I mean, that's surely the minimum amount of due diligence. And then we shift focus to CrossFit.
Do you think there's anything that could be put in place here to assist athletes as far as like educating them on supplements or things like that as far as CrossFit is concerned?
As far as CrossFit is concerned, I do think they could be more hands-on with supplements that they are promoting, and supplements in general is just like give the athletes like a way to, like, hey, if you're thinking about taking said substance, like, use these companies to test this substance, or use our company to test the substance, or like we would test the substance with expense on the athlete, but we would test the substance for you. That way it's like, hey, this is illegal, and that way it's on the radar for CrossFit. It's like, hey, this content has been substance that they've been taking. Now they can get it on a big Excel spreadsheet or whatever, and then they can send it out to all other athletes. Like, hey, if you guys have been taking this, it contains this, and that is illegal. And that kind of get in front of it before you end up looking like me.
So we're talking about whether or not CrossFit should be doing something to educate the athletes. I mean, we've talked about a magic pill that we've done zero research on, not even a Google search. So if CrossFit, offered to test your supplements, if you paid to send them off, if you're not willing to do a little bit of research, would you send your supplements off? Would you pay to have them tested? Because it feels a bit like you don't want to know the answer. Again, that statement that like ignorance doesn't excuse you, but it definitely makes it easier at this point if you can turn around and say, I didn't know, I had no idea. But if the reason you had no idea is because you didn't look, it comes off as insincere. I don't know what more we could expect CrossFit to do. If they had a list of supplements that you were allowed to use, sponsors would be up in arms. This would be outrageous, right? They want to be able to promote their supplements through CrossFit athletes. And if everybody knows that those athletes can't actually take their supplements because they're not on the list, well, they're not going to sell those supplements through that athlete, are they? And ultimately, CrossFit in the rule books say it is the responsibility of the athlete. So they are helping, but at the end of the day, only we can control what we put into our bodies. So it's down to us to know exactly what we are putting into our bodies. And we've seen through Jaylond's own admission that he was not checking. Whether that was, just negligence or deliberately avoiding doing it because he was afraid of the answer, we don't know. We can't ask those questions. Ultimately, it's his responsibility. Now, from this point on, the interview shifts gears a little bit. It talks more about his future, with his career, with competing in the future if he comes back after 2 or 4 years. How does he feel about the reactions he might get from different people? Now, let me make this very clear. It does not matter at this point. Knowingly or unknowingly, he had a banned substance in his body at the time of competition that gave him an unfair advantage over the other people. So for this season, like an appeal or not, nothing is going to change. What can be affected at this point are two things. He can appeal, he can win the appeal, and he can get it changed from a 4-year ban to a 2-year ban. The only other thing he has control of is the court of public opinion. What will people think about the way he acted, about what he did? Was it an accident? Was he a cheat? Well, unfortunately, interviews like this will swing people in one of two directions. So that's why I say that having questions left unanswered can be really dangerous for the athlete. Now, as I said, I don't know Jaylond, and I don't have any personal feelings one way or the other regarding him. I wish him the best of success in writing this whole thing out, and hopefully it doesn't do too much damage to his reputation and his family, and all of the things that this kind of publicity could cause. I hope it all works out well for him. I'm happy to see that CrossFit is doing their job and making sure that they are catching people if there are substances. And, unfortunately, if for some people it is accidental, it's worth it, isn't it? If it's one, removes people that are doing it on purpose, and two, as we've said, whether or not it's on purpose, if it's giving people an unfair advantage, they too need to suffer the consequences. And I don't want to seem like I'm bashing Clydesdale for the interview. I appreciate the fact that they were able to get this interview. I think it's important that we can speak to people and get the answers to these questions. I just worry sometimes if we don't get all of the answers to the questions, and I'm not saying that's their fault. I'm just pointing out the questions that I had left unanswered after watching this interview that were maybe questions I wouldn't have even had previously to seeing the interview. Now, I hope that makes some kind of sense. But I very much appreciate their doing it. I imagine it was a very difficult experience for Scott and the team to do that interview in the first place. Probably not the most fun interview they've ever been able to do. I really hope that I don't have to do any more drug test videos in the near future, but there's still quite a number of competitions, I guess, that have to get back with their results. So who knows what might happen. But thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel by subscribing and liking the videos, leaving comments, clicking the notification bell if you can, as I'm a pretty small channel. You might miss the videos if you don't do that. I'd like to give a special thank you to Mike Halpin, who let me bounce off a number of ideas with him when I was talking about maybe making this video in the first place. And hey, 2 videos in one day. Who knew? It's almost like I'm not allowed to leave the house and go to the gym or work. Well, if you like more videos, well, that's even more reason to support the channel, because the bigger the channel gets, the more videos I'm kind of forced to make. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.